We're heading back to Phoenix all tied up. The Suns were looking unstoppable here just a few games ago, and then the Bucks took two in Milwaukee after big games from Giannis and Chris Middleton. Chris Paul hoping to step up after a rough trip, including a pivotal turnover with 32 seconds left in the Game 4 loss. Now to Game 5. Oh, and it's a big one. Just how important is Game 5? In finals history, the winner of Game 5 with the series tied 2-2 goes on to win the title 72% of the time. The last team that didn't win Game 5 but won the finals was the Miami Heat in 2013. Oh, look who showed up. Richard Jefferson. Where you been all my life? How we doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course. Stephen A., you're up first. Does Chris Paul drop out of the top 5 point guard rankings of all time if he loses this finals?
Yes, I do believe that to be the case. And I was the one that said he'd be in the top 5 if he were to win the championship, because I think that he's one of the great floor generals the game has ever seen, and the surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. But I would remind you who my top 4 are. It would be Irvin Magic Johnson. It would be Steph Curry. It would be Oscar Robertson. It would be the great Isaiah Thomas. He ain't moving any of those 4. All right. And then we have to take into consideration, how about a Jason Kidd? Won a championship with Dallas, went to 2 NBA finals with our man RJ and Kenyon Martin and all of those guys. I know Kenyon Martin got on me lately for a couple of things that I may have said. Kenyon Martin, I ain't got nothing but love for you, my brother. You feel free to get on me all you want to. I ain't got nothing but love and respect for that brother and how he played the game of basketball. Got a lot of love for Kenyon Martin. You know that, RJ. But Jason Kidd was the floor general for y'all when y'all went to 2 NBA Finals appearances. I can't ignore Jason Kidd. I can't ignore GP Gary Payton. I can't ignore guys like that. Of course, the great John Stockton as well. Even though he lost in 2 NBA Finals appearances, CP3 could be in top 5 if he wins it. But if he doesn't, I would have to put probably Jason Kidd or Gary Payton right there.
I'm glad you brought up Gary Payton, Stephen A., because somehow Gary Payton gets lost in these conversations when we talk about point guards. I guess because he scored a lot. Gary Payton led a team to the finals and lost to Michael Jordan. Right, like, you know, in 6 games.
It was an elite defender.
It was an elite defender and could score and could lead, do all those things. Gary Payton was totally great. I don't think Chris Paul necessarily drops out of the top 5. I agree with your top 4. Remember when you made your point guard list? I said, perfect. I agree. I think Stockton has a hell of a case, but ultimately we both agree why he's not there, because he couldn't take over a game the same way that, let's say, Isaiah could, right? And I give Isaiah the slightest of margins over Stockton. And Steve Nash was not a defender, and although Stockton was and Payton was, but Payton didn't have the kind of point guard ability to elevate everyone that I feel Chris Paul has. Not that he doesn't have it, but I think Chris Paul has more of that stuff. Now there's Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd couldn't shoot until he was no longer at his best. It's not that he's a clear cut over any of these guys. Or, by the way, guys like Kevin Johnson and guys that don't always come up. Now there's Lillard, there's Westbrook. Do you consider AI a point guard? There are a lot of guys. But in terms of point guards and the way we think about how a point guard plays, Chris Paul still has a hell of a case as a top 5 guy, even if he loses here. Guys, what is the weakness exactly? Defends, checks. Is he a floor general? Check. Can he score at every level? And he can shoot. And he has a feel for the game. And he's a leader. And it goes on and on and on. Chris Paul is kind of the perfect point guard. So while you're right, it's not a slam dunk, so to speak, one way or another. If he loses with Payton, Nash, Stockton, Kidd, and the list goes on, they ain't slam dunks over him either. And in fact, if push comes to shove, I'd probably, by the narrowest of margins, still take CP3.
You know what's so funny is that we're talking about a lot of modern day point guards in the last 20, 25 years. We're not even talking about legacy point guards when you talk about Bob Cousy. I know the game was different, but even like a Walt Clyde Frazier. Look at some of the numbers that he put up in the finals when he was with the Knicks. It's like there's so many high-level point guards, and for me, obviously, I'm biased. I think Jason Kidd is the best point guard that I played with outside, and even seen outside of Magic Johnson. But I'll show you the weakness for Chris Paul. This is where Chris Paul, in my opinion, is not a top 5 point guard. And even though there's other guys that have these things, look, in 2018, he was up 3-2 against the Warriors. In 16, he's up 2-0 against the Trailblazers, 3-1 against the Rockets, 2-0 against the Grizzlies, and 3-2 against the Spurs. And all of those were losses. All of those were losses. So while he is a great point guard and he is one of the best point guards of this era, if not the best point guard of his generation, to me, that's the thing that keeps him out of the top 5 all time. When you have all of these checklists, we talk about John Stockton, lost twice to Michael Jordan. Gary Payton lost to Michael Jordan. Jason Kidd lost to Kobe and Shaq. And then we also lost to Tim Duncan and David Robinson. So even when you look at some of the great point guards of all time, some of their losses were to high-level teams. And Chris Paul has a lot of tough postseason losses here. And even here, they're up 2-0, and there's a chance that they might still lose this series. That's why, to me, he's not a top 5. If he wins this, it puts him in the conversation for top 5.
I get where you're coming from. I would tell you that as I look at his career in New Orleans with the Clippers, obviously Oklahoma City, Houston, and now, Phoenix, Chris Paul's never really been the favorite. The 1 year with Lob City was a catastrophe when they were 3-2 about to advance the Clippers to their first conference finals appearance. And they collapsed at the hands of Houston with Kevin McHale as the coach, sitting James Harden down with Dwight Howard and others in the lineup. They went on like a 49-9 run. But I look at CP3, and one of the things, RJ, that I get into it with Max on occasion, CP3 is not some 6'4" athletic freak like Russell Westbrook. He's not a 6'2", 6'3" athletic freak like Derrick Rose once was. CP3 is a 6-foot guard. And so when you look at him and the absence of athleticism, meaning above the rim capability and things of that nature, okay, what do you have to lean on? The basic fundamentals of basketball and a cerebral approach to the game that is rivaled by very few in the game's history. And when we look at it from that perspective, that's where the word quintessential comes into play, which is why I say CP3 is one of the great quintessential point guards we have ever seen. There's a level of accountability, and Max and I have disagreed with this. There's a level of accountability that I would elevate in his direction if he had the size and athleticism of a Russell Westbrook or a Derrick Rose. But considering the fact that he was a miniature point guard, and he's been able to do what he did, I look at Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan at the time as not getting it done. Yeah. You understand? And I looked at James Harden and Trevor Ariza shooting 0 for 12. That not getting it done. But I didn't expect them to be Golden State anyway. That's how I view it.
The only place, Stephen A., you and I disagree there is if you're short, you're not as good. I mean, that's the problem, right? So I would rate guys ahead of him. But I want to get into that for a second. No short point guard has ever really won a championship as the best player on the team since Isaiah won for Steph Curry. And it was only because both Kyrie and Kevin Love got hurt, or it would be 0 for Steph Curry. Now think about that. If not for LeBron's second and third best players getting hurt, Steph Curry would have exactly
that's ridiculous.
0 championships as the best player on the team. Well, I'm stating a fact. Was he better than Kevin Durant? Wait a minute. Was he better than Kevin Durant?
Steph Curry, you saying Steph Curry wouldn't have got a ring?
No. As the best player on the team.
Oh, okay.
Short
I thought you were saying,
so you and I actually...
I apologize. I thought you were saying he wouldn't have a championship. I got it.
So you and I see eye to eye about short point guards, right? Smaller players are at a disadvantage. That's why it doesn't happen. Even Isaiah, as the best player, had a whole lot of help. That was an evenly balanced team. My point is this.
6'3".
Yeah, I know, but he's slightly built. It's true, but he's slightly. My point is this.
Go ahead.
My point is this. Chris Paul was never on a team with a player better than him that lost, right? Like Blake Griffin won better than him. Who was better than him? James Harden? That's only because Chris Paul got hurt. If Chris Paul stayed healthy, I think they'd have beaten the Warriors, right? So to kind of point at Chris Paul and say, well, you've collapsed. He was usually, as Stephen A. points out, playing better teams, RJ. He was usually the best player on the team at 6 feet tall.
Yeah, but this is the thing, and so many times we want to kind of dissect things. Go back and look at LeBron James' finals record as we dissect so many times. How many times was he the favorite? How many times was he truly the favorite? A lot of people point to that Mavericks loss. You know, that's a really bad one. But how many times was it? It's not about being the favorite.
At least 4.
It's about being up 3-2.
He was the
It's about
favorite
being
about
up
3
2-0.
out of.
It's about up.
He was the favorite about 3 or 4 out of the 10 times.
Yeah. No, maybe
Yeah, that's what
5
I'm
with the
saying.
Lakers, too.
Yeah, but my point is this, is that it's about how you play in that moment. When you're up 3-0, you're up 2-0, you're up 3-2. You're like, when you have those moments, you are that good. If you are the point god, those are moments that you need to finish out. And there's just been too many times. Now, mind you, he's been in the postseason 13 times in his career. There's too many times where he didn't finish that out. That, to me, doesn't put him in that same category as
But
the
RJ,
Magics, the Jason Kidds, and the John Stocktons.
RJ, let me ask you this question because you're the guy that played in the NBA. You're more qualified than any of us to answer this question. I need to know how much, I don't know if the word is credence or how much of a pass do you give a guy when at least 60% of those times it was due to injury?
I give him a ton. I give him a ton of pass because that's something that you can't help. A broken hand, a pop hamstring, that's something. But also there's a durability because we want to judge Anthony
Go
Davis
look at
on his
CP's injury though.
durability.
Go look at his history, RJ, every single time. Even now, we
availability.
all know. You see it. We all know he ain't healthy. Even now, every single time almost, the guy gets hurt.
The best ability is availability. The best ability is availability. If you're not available in the best moments, oh well.
RJ, thank you for moonlighting with us. We appreciate